Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to wait a minute or so for everybody to join our call, so hang tight with us, and thanks so much for being here. I see a few more of you joining. We're just going to wait a little bit for others to hop on the call as well. Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm Felicia Baca, and I'm the Executive Director of the Salt Lake City Arts Council, and we provide support to artists and arts organizations in the community through a variety of programs and grant making to Salt Lake City residents. Thank you all so much for being here. We hope that you're all doing well and staying safe. And I just want to say I've been incredibly impressed with the resilience and flexibility with the arts and cultural sector over the past several weeks. And I feel so honored to really be a part of this community as we see things evolve. I'm going to take care of a few housekeeping items before we get started. I want to thank our partners that have hosted this series with us, which is the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, the Utah Cultural Alliance, Utah Humanities, Utah Museums Association, and a variety of local arts agencies across the entire state. Just as a quick note, if you want to view closed captioning, you should have an icon at the bottom of your screen that you can turn off to get captions for this session. So a few other notes is there is an opportunity, we'll put this into the chat, for people to participate in a bulk purchase of PPE, so personal protective equipment, that is being organized by a variety of partners, but you can find that link in the chat. And so we're looking at bulk discounts for all of that PPE gear. Another opportunity for the community is that the Governor's Office of Economic Development has a commercial rental assistance fund that is it's open right now on a first come, first served basis until the funds run out. So this can help small businesses, nonprofits, tribal businesses, sole proprietors, and others that pay rent. So that may look like artist studios as well. So these loans are not to exceed $10,000. And again, they're only open until the funds have run out. So you can learn more at the link in your chat. And a last note is that the Tuesday Cultural Conversations that are hosted by the Cultural Alliance tomorrow at 2 o'clock are also going to focus on how and when to reopen, with various panelists discussing this. So you can, again, visit the link in the chat to catch up on that conversation. So today we're going to be talking about with 3 different organizations that have or are planning to reopen, and we're going to talk to them about how they've made those decisions with their organizations and boards and partners, and how they're navigating those processes. Just so you know, at the end we're going to have a 20-minute Q&A session. There's a Q&A feature where you can enter your questions, and at the end I'll go through those and ask the various panelists or the group at the end of all of the speakers. So first, we're going to talk to James Parker, who is the Executive Director of the Parker Theater. The Parker Theater is a 501c3 in South Salt Lake, and it was founded in 1985 with a mission to create an environment for families to experience and engage in live theater. Every year, a portion of their plays are original works specific specifically written for their audiences. They also do drama classes, instruction in acting and voice, and other techniques for young people. Recently, they opened a new production called, it's a family-friendly sketch comedy called The Coronavirus Conundrum, which we're going to talk about a bit today. So it was written by a full team in about a week and rehearsed in 4 days. So James is going to tell us a little bit about that, and I'll let you take it away, James. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Parker. So yeah, you kind of explained it. So it was kind of an interesting thing because we were shut down in the middle of production, just like everybody else. And when we were looking at seeing what we could possibly do in the future, it's been very difficult. And many of you have seen kind of what the climate is with either theater companies projecting out really far. And so we just kind of went on to hold. And so I had initially allowed us not to try to push anything, to take a break, to pause, to take a breather. And I actually took like a weekend trip actually, just to not think about any of it. And shortly after we heard about going to the orange zone, we looked at all of the guidelines, and we looked down at it all very carefully up and down, and we thought, you know what, I think we can perform. I think it's totally possible, at least for our theater and for our circumstance. And but the first thing we had to address was, could we do it safely, but also like, what's the public perception too, right? Because, you know, you could say, well, we're doing it safely, but also like, how do people feel as they're entering? So the first thing we addressed was all of our entrances and exits and cleaning procedures and our seating chart and maps and how we were going to do that. And then once that was kind of figured out, we knew we couldn't do a regular show. And part of the reason is because one, you know, maybe sourcing actors who don't feel safe or distancing, and just intermission alone kind of kills the whole idea of doing a show. So what we did is we decided to come up with a show, create a show specifically that we knew we could do safely and that we could do, you know, to overcome kind of the mechanical problems that you might experience in a theater. So what we decided is that we would do something uplifting and eventually turn into a comedy, because we all need to laugh right now. And I said, let's do a one-act comedy that avoids intermission, and let's do it about the same amount of time that you would spend in a grocery store, right? So people are going to start to feel uncomfortable in a room together after a certain period of time, thinking, is this right? You know, should we be doing this? So we said, here's the parameters of creating, of doing a show. And we also looked at, could we adapt some of our scripts, but it just made sense to create one. So, I basically called a bunch of our actors that were kind of our go-to people and said, hey, are you guys interested in doing a show? Where do you feel about the safety issues? And we got some people that were on board. And we took about a week crowdsourcing ideas into a script, and then I edited it down. And then on the Monday before we opened, we gave that into the hands of the actors and let them kind of develop and create the comedy out of it. So there was a rehearsal time, but it was also a creation time. And they took about 2 days doing that, with creating and then running through. And then the other thing that we did is we have our current show, actually, we still have the stage up, but we just kind of quickly put a staging in front of it, curtains and panels, and we created 3 platforms in the front to create safety zones for the actors, right? Because the time to create blocking and complicated blocking or interaction wasn't really a possibility. So we said, here's 3 platforms. You pick a platform that you're going to be on, and it creates a safety zone between the actors, but also distancing from the audience. So everything is designed to address what people's comfort levels are, and also to obviously create a show in such a short amount of time. So we're reducing and simplifying all those normal things that you you would experience in a normal production. And we don't normally do this kind of stuff, although it's definitely in our wheelhouse to be creative and create things on the fly. So that's kind of our process. A couple of other questions that were asked that I think some of the other people will probably address, but we did have to lay off most of our part-time staff. We're down to pretty much a skeleton crew, and that's been okay. With our current staff that's currently on, obviously people are feeling stress at times in one point or another, and the way that I've addressed those is to give them lots and lots of latitude to take a breather. You know, if they're feeling stressed, I said, you know, just don't come in today. You know, you can't force yourself through this process. So giving a lot of people time to think and to breathe and to relax so that they can come back with being refreshed and stronger ideas. And that seems to have been helping quite a bit. The other thing is we're really honest with the staff, talking about revenue losses, what the scenarios might be for the future. And even though it's hard to be, you know, a single leader kind of within this, but being super positive, energetic, does a lot for people who are more in the follower category. They're looking towards someone to give them hope and to give them the energy that they need to say, yeah, we can do this, we can get through this. So just in closing, the advice that I have to give to others, I mean, everyone has their own situation, but for us, it's been adapt and pivot, and no idea is too crazy to throw out there. So we're just throwing out all the ideas. One idea that I had is I said, hey, let's do, when we can bring up our show, our regular show, let's do one act one night and the second act another night. That sounds crazy, but hey, maybe, right? So any of that can kind of lead to something viable. Also, the other thing that I have in closing is that revenue does not need to be the only goal. So forward motion, creating confidence with your patrons and your members, abolishing uncertainty, like getting rid of that word will go a long ways for people as things start to come back to normal. I keep telling everyone that we're just greasing the wheels. We have to start at some point. So if we've been greasing the wheels the whole time, it'll be so much easier to get that engine moving as opposed to it having it been seized up. So that's what we're doing. I hope that helps, and I'll sign off and let you move on to the next presenter.
Thank you so much for that, Jimmy. And I really appreciate you addressing the how you worked with your staff through that and talking a little bit, because I think that's something that we're all in need of, and it looks different for a lot of us. Our next presenter is Tim Braun. He is the president and CEO of Tracy Aviary, and he's led the aviary since 2005. And during that time has had the good fortune of overseeing and deepening of the organization's reach into the community with more investment in education and the launching of a new conservation department to complement their incredible exhibitions and gardens that are really the hallmark of their location in Liberty Park in Salt Lake City. Prior to joining the aviary, Tim spent more than a decade leading nonprofit organizations and 7 years as the director of the Utah Society for Environmental Education. And he has served on a number of nonprofit boards, including the McGillis School, Hawkwatch International, Four Corners School of Outdoor Education, and Friends of the Great Salt Lake. So Tim, I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll try to just build on what Jimmy said and not reiterate anything that he already mentioned. And if you have additional questions, you can certainly reach out to me either at the end of the presentations today, or you can get in touch with me with my email later on. So the first thing that I'll share with you is we have a live animal collection. And so regardless of our being open to the public or not, we had staff coming in to feed the animals, and we had people coming in to take care of the buildings that the animals were in. So the only staff that weren't really coming in were our guest service staff, or the staff that interface with the public. And so for us, the decision to reopen might be different than for a lot of you, because we weren't able to scale down to very minimal expenses. Our expenses remained relatively high, and the risk of opening and bringing guests back were kind of minimized because of that. So I think that you're in a slightly different position, and you should think about that. The next thing that I think is important to understand is that your staff and your board, just like the public, are on a spectrum of being concerned. And I think everyone, for the most part, is cautious. So I don't want to say anybody's not cautious or being careless, but your staff will be on one end of the spectrum where, you know, they're wearing 2 or 3 masks while driving in their car alone, to people toward the other end of the spectrum where they're not wearing a mask if they're 10 feet away from another person. And for us, it's been continuous education for over a month of helping people understand safety and what we're doing to minimize risk. And at times, I think just listening to them and giving them a platform to express their concerns. We've been sharing the research and constantly having the communication, trying to bring them along in our decision making and making sure that they understand that staff safety is of the utmost importance to us. Once we opened, and we opened to the public on May 2nd, in retrospect, it shouldn't be surprising that some of our guests were not wearing masks, even though we asked people to. And I think one thing that I've processed after that is it's probably not surprising that the first people who would come back would be less cautious than those who are staying away and letting things settle out more and more. And so that's created issues with just us needing to invest in a lot of signage and a lot more staff to encourage the appropriate behaviors, being mostly wearing masks and social distancing. So we've actually had to bring on more guest service, or the staff people who interact with guests, than we would have under normal operating procedures. And something for us that's been a little bit tricky is trying to figure out your audience threshold, the capacity of people you can have in a facility and allow for that optimal social distancing. And what I've personally discovered is it only takes like 4 or 5 people to infringe on my comfort level, right? So if there's a 10-foot wide path and there's 4 people walking shoulder to shoulder towards me and they're not budging, I have to make my decision to get off the sidewalk or whatever. But it's a nuance, because while you might be able to have 100 people in your theater, it only takes a couple not adhering to best practices to make some folks a little bit uncomfortable. Another thing I'll share, and this is something that's also happened at the zoo, despite us reducing the number of guests that we would allow in on an hourly basis, we've not hit those numbers. And so we're already looking at reduced attendance, but then when you're not even hitting those reduced attendance numbers, that's a little bit alarming. So what happens if you open and they don't come? Final things, just in response to some prompting questions. I think for us, we are looking down the road, not just through summer, but what it will take for us to survive the fall and the winter and next spring. What resources do we need to have in place for that? What kind of reserves or resources can we work on now in case in the future, and if in October it gets much worse than it is now, how do we kind of strengthen ourselves for the long run? And with that, I'm going to close and turn it back to Felicia.
Hey, Tim, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate the perspective on knowing that staff or even the public has a really wide range of interpretation or comfort level. We have a lot of guides coming out of the state and the county, and how people are reacting to that is varied. And so that continued education is really important. So thanks for addressing that. Our next speaker I want to introduce is Laura Braun. She's the executive director of the MOA Music Festival. And Laura has worked to build future audiences for the arts through teaching, research, performances, and administration. She was previously employed with the Colorado Springs Symphony, the Dubuque Symphony in Iowa, and the Lawton Symphony Orchestra in Oklahoma. She's been the executive director of MOA Music Festival for over 7 years and serves as a second oboist, also in the Grand Junction Symphony Orchestra, and is an avid lover of summer music festivals. Thanks for being here, Laura.
Thank you. Just to give you a quick background on the MOA Music Festival, we have concerts throughout an 18-day festival. So usually we'll have 1 to 2 concerts every day for about 18 days. We have chamber music where we pull people from different areas, chamber musicians. We have some pre-formed groups that come to visit us with jazz and traditional music. And we're mostly an outdoor festival, which is great in so many ways. We do have our historic Star Hall here in Moab that we also utilize. We are still in the planning stages. We are hoping to be open and giving some sort of festival in September. Our dates start at the very end of August and go through the first part of September. We really started to evaluate in March with what exactly, like, this is not going to end well. So we were really thinking about how we could make our festival still happen. A very big plus is that we are an outdoor festival, and we've been doing this for so many years in the outdoors, and it's a safer place than performing indoors as far as COVID-19. People we would hope would be more comfortable. There would hopefully be more space for people to spread out. So right now Moab is in orange still. We're one of the counties in the state who did not move to yellow. I anticipate that will probably be the case, that we will never really go to green when the whole state goes to green. Things that we have been talking about to kind of initially set up our festival and to talk about what we are willing or not willing to do. We looked at the financial, the artistic, our audience experience, if they're going to be safe, if we can make them safe, if they're going to actually come. Artist safety, of course, and conditions. Our timeline, like when do we need to really make a decision. The feasibility of our decisions and the marketing and PR that has to happen around that. It's daunting, and I think many of you have discovered that. We just recently had a board meeting actually, and we really haven't decided exactly what we're going to do, but we have a very good idea of what we're not going to do. So we have cut some concerts that are not public yet, but we will be doing that. Just again, because they weren't feasible, because maybe they were indoors. We're trying to move, again, everything outdoors. There's also the issue, just of course, of the distancing that we're still trying to figure out, because even though we're outdoors, you still have a distancing problem depending on how many people you can fit. And you can fit a lot of people in an outdoors area, but would that make the artistic experience a good experience? Would it be feasible? Would you be able to control those ingress and egress points? So we're still talking a lot about that. One of the things that came to our attention really early on is that we really have, because we're rural, because we have two national parks and a state park here, we have lots of visitors. And if many of you might know that Moab was very, at the beginning, wanted everybody to stay away because we weren't sure if we would have the hospital facilities to help out people in case there was a problem. It is very much polarized our community. So when we're deciding what we can or cannot do, or what we're willing to do or not do, or what, however you want to put that, one of our main thoughts is, what will the locals say, and how will we be affecting them, or even just the perception of affecting them. So again, one of those things that we're still talking about, and I think is a very valid point. You're not going to please everybody, but you should have a very good plan as to why you're doing it and how you can help ease some of those thoughts. Another thing, let's see. Oh, what I wanted to specifically address are staffing changes. Right now, we are a very small staff anyway, so we, as of now, of course, we need everybody that we can possibly get, but I do anticipate that we will, if depending on what we can do for September, we will have to add quite a few people to kind of monitor and make sure that people understand, you know, what we set up as the rules or regulations. You know, if we have a one-way bathroom, you know, set up, just to make sure, to remind people to stay apart, to, you know, walk in one way, come out the other way, that kind of thing. One of the things I found out actually very recently this weekend, we had a board meeting, and my staff, who I thought I had a pretty good handle on what they would like to see as far as the length of our festival, or what they were comfortable with as far as safety, was really not what I thought it was. So they are indicating to me that they would like something a little more shorter, a little more controlled. There's still a level of comfort that we're still negotiating. So that just tells me that I need to either listen more carefully, or really get people to talk more about how they are feeling about continuing as we are planning, and what that looks like for them. We have very long hours during the festival. I've never actually been in a job where I've had to work such long hours for such a minimal time period. The other thing that came to my attention today too is we were not really going to focus on education, which is part of our mission, but with things changing, we thought we didn't really need to focus on this component. But in talking with actually the Moab Folk Festival, talking about partnering and what we could do for this town in terms of fulfilling both of our missions in terms of education, whether or not the schools will be in session or online again, just kind of feeling that out. And so that's again another part where not really well thought out, but something that has come into the mix, that perhaps if we don't have a festival, or if we have a minimal festival, having some kind of ongoing educational component. And the last thing that I think is important, that we are quickly learning, it's great to have all this time to plan, and that we didn't have to that we have all this time to plan and didn't have to turn on the dime, can be problematic, because you can just do the what if scenarios over and over and over again, and the rules keep changing and everything keeps changing. So picking a time where you're going to say, this is what we're doing, I think that's the way to go forward. So we're going to be picking a date that we're going to stick with to make a very final decision, until that final decision, of course, is, oh, actually we can't do this, we have to cancel our festival. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Laura. I really appreciate that you talked a little bit about, obviously things feel like a real moving target. And what came through in that for me is how much you're relying on your board and your staff for communication to know that you're going to learn something new every day and that you're going to have to pivot and shift, and that you're flexible with that. So we're going to jump into Q&A. As a reminder, you can drop those into the Q&A section, and I'll magically have those pop up and start to address them. So the first question we have is for Jimmy, and anybody else can answer this after. Are you going to require audience members who watch the play to wear masks, and how are you creating seating charts to maintain social distancing? And I'll also say, Jimmy has this incredible video online that he could maybe talk about a little bit more too about that.
Yeah, we are requiring people to wear masks. It's a lot of it is about the comfort level of people around you, right? Like, I know some people are not wearing masks and some people are, but in our space, we require it for them to be here. We also have masks available for them to purchase, as well as disposable masks, obviously, to waylay someone's concern about spending money. We put together a safety video on our website to kind of walk people through the process. It was a one-man band kind of a thing. I didn't have a camera crew. I just kind of did it all on my own. The quality is not great, but at least it kind of connects with the audience. And we've created a landing page, which I've put into the chat that you can take a look at. And we do have a seating chart. So what we did is that our seating is general admission. So what we were able to do is we were able to chart out the correct distancing, actually like going into the theater with the tape measure and figure out where people can sit and still maintain that guideline. So what we did is we created a 4-seat group seating chart. So there's groups of 4. And then that can be altered depending on whether we have groups larger or smaller. And we've actually had groups of like 8 come, like well, it's Utah. So, you're going to have groups of 8 or 7 occasionally. But then we also have people who are just coming alone, singles, which isn't as financially exciting, but we want them to come and laugh too. So that's kind of what we've done. And I posted that link that you can take a look at that kind of shows what we did.
And Tim or Laura, do you obviously have outdoor spaces that are really different than seated. And what was interesting, Laura, for me is that in some ways outdoors can be safer, but people can also, they're not really bound by their seating. So if either of you kind of want to speak to maybe how you're getting the word out about safety in advance, or how you'll utilize those staff and distancing people.
Yes, we've talked actually a lot about how, because we have, lawn area, how, just like Jimmy was talking about, like, are we going to somehow mask tape off areas in which people can be in? And if somebody comes close to their space, is, who's going to come in and tell them, you need to create more of a space between you. It's something we haven't solved, but definitely talking a lot about. We also have music hikes, and which includes people walking, into a site. So how are we going to ensure that they don't bunch up at some point? Because you always got the slower person is always in front. So how we'll do that. And I can't tell you that we have all the answers, but we're definitely generating a lot of ideas about what some possibilities could be.
Great, thanks.
The additional information I could offer is that 3-year-olds tend not to do exactly what you ask them to do. And a parent of a kid in a stroller, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old does not always have, the kids doing what you want them to. And so I have experienced myself that little toddler running up and hugging my leg and thinking, gosh, that's darling. And it's just not exactly what I want to experience right now. So I think those young kids introduce a whole nother piece to this.
Yeah, and I appreciate you talking about some of the unanticipated things that will inevitably happen in your context. The next one is a question for everybody. So has anybody thought about live streaming any events or any of their programming? And is there a way that you've found to monetize that, or is that not at the forefront of what you're doing? And you know, something I've heard a lot about is that one of the unintended benefits of this is that many people have been able to attend events or productions that otherwise wouldn't have been able to. So just wondering if any of you are working in the virtual world or have dipped your toes in that.
I'll take a stab at that. So we created something called the Virtual Aviary, and it's on our webpage, and it's got a lot of education resources, lots of videos, lots of encouraging people to get outside and look for downy woodpeckers and investigate their local environment and stuff like that. So we've been really active with that, and a great point about the accessibility that it provides is greater than what we have in Liberty Park. So that's been interesting, and it's made us think of this virtual campus that we didn't have before this crisis. We have not directly tried to monetize that, although we have applied for a couple grants to keep it going. So to date, I don't think it's quite paid for itself from a cost benefits, well, from a cost standpoint, but I think the benefit actually, something Jimmy talked about, just greasing the wheels and kind of being present and letting your audience know that you're around is important. So it has helped us accomplish that.
Great, thanks for that. Does anybody else want to respond to that before I move on?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, Tim definitely brought that up, that, you know, it seems like in this age of technology that things are really easy to do and also to monetize. But, you know, in the case of, and I'm sure maybe everyone feels this way, and I know there's a lot of live streaming of events, but there's a really beautiful and compelling video that maybe many people have seen. It's from the artistic director of the Guthrie Theater, which is one of our most prominent theaters in the United States. And he talks about how, you know, in theater, people's, you know, if you're going to film something, then it's no longer theater, it's actually film. And studies have been done that in live theater, that your audience's heartbeats actually start to synchronize with each other, and there's just a different feeling. And we had a lot of people ask about it. And, you know, I kind of compare it to, you know, you want to hire Big H, right? It's really good and fresh, and you go and you get it. And that's what people want. And if I were to give someone theater with a live stream, it would be like a microwaved hamburger with no toppings or condiments. It'd still be a hamburger, but it wouldn't be the same. And I'm gonna post that link to the artistic director of the Guthrie, because I think it's pretty compelling as to why they've chosen not to live stream or show any of their productions on film.
Thanks, James. We have about 7 minutes left. Another question that we have is, has anybody looked like into informed consent documents? Have you addressed any liability concerns if someone contracts or tracks coronavirus to your event, and heard anything about you know, limiting the liability there?
So I'll just jump in, and this isn't a direct answer to that, signing an informed consent document, but with respect to wearing masks and us encouraging versus mandating that people wear masks, we've felt that there are members of the public that are looking for a fight, and that they've come with the intention to not wear a mask make a point. And, you know, years ago, we had a gentleman come to the aviary with a rifle strapped to his back. So it was not a concealed weapon. It was out there, an open carry or something like that, and apparently legal. And we have just not really addressed it, I guess. We've just allowed, if people don't want to wear a mask, then we're not going to force them to. And it's an awkward situation for sure, but we're not sure that we want to get into a fight with anyone at the same time.
Great, thanks for that. And I'm just going to remind everybody that if we don't have time for all the questions, we'll drop a link into the chat and we'll answer as many unanswered questions as we can in a document that will live on the website. Is anybody else want to address that question specifically with the consent form?
This is Laura. We have talked at length about that when people buy their tickets. Is the waiver right there? When you're buying this ticket, you agree to this. And we've heard lots of organizations around Utah who have had, you know, at first required the mask and not required the mask. And so I fully suspect that we will not also require masks. And one of the things that we're going to do is kind of talk to some of the outfitters around here. They have great lawyers telling them great things about liability, and also consenting, of course, or talking to the lawyers through our board. It's really tough, because you think sure that if you put this here and put that there and you make them sign this, that of course you're not going to be sued or nothing's going to happen legal wise. But of course you can never guarantee that. And I think for us it was, especially for our staff, when talking through this and bringing some anecdotes to the board, just making them aware that they have to agree that we're going to do this, and they're going to have this level of risk associated with it, or this level of risk, or this level of risk. But just knowing that nothing is ever set in stone, nothing will ever guarantee that somebody won't sue you or something won't happen to that effect.
Thanks for that, Laura. And I want to make a correction that if you have additional questions, we will reach out to you individually to answer those questions. I have one more question. We have about 4 minutes left, and anybody could address this, but I'm wondering if any of you have considered funding sources from your sponsors or grantors in terms of executing your events or opening, and how you've navigated that in terms of the funding community and their expectations. And as some of you mentioned, Laura, you know what you're not going to do, but you don't know what you're going to do yet. Does anybody want to speak to that briefly?
We are still, just because nobody else, we're still trying to reach out to our funders. I actually have a couple of people who said they would strongly, want us to do something, whether it be a concert or a something. But I think that, I don't know if this answers your question, but there's still so much, I think there's so much that the public doesn't understand. And even I think for board members too, they have a hard time understanding everything that has to go on behind the scenes in order for your event or your organization to open, that sometimes it just isn't feasible, but you're just going to do the best you can. But I think our funders are going to be, hopefully, one of the things I found as an arts organization, I haven't had people call in, and ask what we're doing, and I want to support you. It's more of they're kind of waiting and to see what we're doing, so that we just need to get out there and let them know and get that messaging out there about what we are doing, until we either do it, actually have the festival in whatever form we say, or cancel it because it's not feasible at that time.
Great, thanks, Laura. Tim?
I'll just quickly add that we have a strong partnership with Young Living Essential Oils, and they were open to a discussion about using the some funds that they've earmarked for us for operations instead of the project that we had originally talked about. So that was quite nice, and I think some loyal partners might be, I think everybody realizes that we're in unprecedented waters here, and seems like people are open to the discussion to redeploy money in a way that's going to help you stay afloat.
Great, thanks, Tim. So we are reaching the end of our time. So I just really want to thank all of our panelists for being with us today, and all of you. And we started holding this call every 2 weeks. So in the chat, you can also see the link to Utah Arts and Museums, and you can find the schedule and past videos there for upcoming sessions. So we really appreciate the input and participation of everybody, and we hope you stay safe, and we're really looking forward to having the sector really bring the community back and being able to gather again, since this is what we really rely on. So thank you everybody for sharing your experiences, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.